Black Swan is perhaps one of the most complex psychological horror films we have ever seen, yet alone written about. Yet it is also one of the rare works of cinema that not only shows, but makes you feel the terror of a psyche collapsing. It makes you dread the horror of losing your sense of self, feel how the psyche once denied can seize the reins of reality itself, and it reveals with brutal clarity what it means to be trapped forever by someone else's dreams. We are Curious Cinema, and we explain movies, series, and so on through the lenses of psychology, philosophy, myth, and more. And today we are explaining the depths and hidden meanings of the movie masterpiece, Black Swan. So let us dive in.
Somebody I was living with had a psychotic breakdown. It was a horrifying experience, one I had to get down on paper.
On the surface, the premise sounds almost ordinary. A girl striving to become the best ballet dancer in a gray reality. For those with the nerve to endure it, the film reveals something far more brutal. This is not a tale of ballet. It is the story of a suppressed soul stolen from itself, fighting in horror and agony to reclaim the right to exist within its fragile mortal shell. The movie begins in the world of dreams, the vast chamber of the unconscious where no human can hide from the voice of the psyche's deepest truth. Here, Nina Sawyers finds herself already upon the stage, dancing the part of the White Swan, the role she has trained her entire life to embody. She is delicate, graceful, porcelain in her fragility. But then another figure enters, the Black Swan. However, it is not a woman, as tradition would demand, but a man. The script of The Black Swan draws heavily on the legendary Swan Lake, composed by the Russian master Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. At its heart, the opera is an exploration of the duality of the feminine, what psychology would later name the anima. The same dancer embodies both the White Swan and the Black Swan, for they are not opposites, but two faces of the same force. The White Swan represents innocence, purity, fragility. The Black Swan embodies seduction, chaos, shadow. The dance of the two is the ballet's central theme. The feminine spirit cannot be confined to a single form, but moves between light and darkness, grace and destruction. Why then, in Nina's first dream, does the Black Swan appear as a man? This detail is no accident. It sets the stage for the psychological trial already unfolding within her. A trial so clear, so archetypically precise, that a skilled psychologist could already name the forces at work from this first scene alone.
If you think the anima as being nothing but what you know about her, you have not the receptiveness of a listening attitude, and so she becomes nothing but a load of brutal emotions. You have never given her a chance of expressing herself, and therefore she has become inhuman and brutal.
In dreams, the ego's daily grip is loosened. The unconscious speaks directly, and the shadow, the repressed truths, instincts, and forbidden desires emerges with clarity. Thus, when Nina's unconscious distorts the symbolic core of Swan Lake, it is not a creative flourish, but a warning. Something vital is breaking through, something she has hidden too long. The Black Swan, as symbol, represents precisely those aspects of the feminine which society most often suppresses. sensuality, wildness, chaotic freedom. These are the voices every woman carries, yet few are permitted to express in the ordered structures of modern life. In myth, however, these same forces were once sacred. They appear as Freya in Norse tradition, Kali in Hindu myth, and especially important for this movie, Lilith in Jewish lore. All untamed goddesses, feared and worshipped in equal measure. But with the rise of Abrahamic religions, including Christianity, this spectrum of the feminine was fractured. Goddesses who embodied both love and chaos was cast into shadow. In their place, only the pure, innocent, submissive feminine was exhaled. The Virgin Mary enthroned, while her darker sister condemned as sinful, dangerous, demonic. Yet repression is never erasure. What is denied does not vanish. It sinks into the shadow, twists and resurfaces through unconscious means. Most dangerously, it returns as projection, cast outward onto others, where the psyche can see from a safe distance what it cannot yet admit within. In Nina's case, this projected shadow finds its form in men. Thus, in her dream, the Black Swan must appear as male. Were the figure to stand in its true form, the dark feminine itself, Nina's fragile psyche would recoil. By disguising itself, the unconscious ensures she at least receives the message. And so, the truth declares itself. Black Swan is not truly about ballet. It is the story of Nina confronting the repressed feminine within her own soul. The wild, the chaotic, the shadow currents she has denied. The stage, the mirrors, the costumes, these are only the scenery. The real performance is the battle within. Nina opens her eyes with what begins as a smile, then quickly shades into concern. The door creaks open, sunlight spills across her face, and she greets it with a faint smile. She rises, stretching her neck and toes. Her toes crack sharply, a violent intrusion upon the fragile grace of the moment. Already, the omen is there. Nina's world and the world of ballet itself is not simply light and serenity, but a discipline of pain, fracture, and sacrifice. She lives at home with her mother, with no father in sight. At first glance, her mother appears as a supportive guardian of Nina's pursuit. Today seems to promise opportunity. The director of the New York City Ballet has allegedly pledged to feature her more this season. Yet Black Swan is not a tale of ambition alone. It is the story of the shadow breaking through the fragile walls of the psyche, dismantling the life one has known, both for good and for ruin. That slow unraveling begins not on the stage, but at the morning table. When her mother notices a wound on Nina's shoulder, warmth collapses into cold suspicion. Nina, conditioned to navigate these sudden turns, diffuses the moment and flees to work. On the subway, drifting in a half-trance, she is seduced by flickers of dark movement in the passing windows, shadows that dance with an allure beyond reason. Then her gaze looks onto a woman in the neighboring car. There is no obvious reason for the pull, yet Nina cannot look away. Something in her psyche recognizes what her conscious mind cannot. But this is not the only figure who draws her with unnatural force. Outside the ballet itself, Nina is transfixed by a poster of Beth McIntyre, the company's reigning star, the very image of perfection. To Nina, Beth is not merely a dancer. She is the persona incarnate, the embodiment of the flawless queen of the ballet. Idealized, untouchable, she embodies everything Nina believes she must become. Thus, when Nina overhears whispers in the dressing room that Beth is finished, too old, she nearly blurs out her grief. For when Beth is diminished, so too is Nina. Here we glimpse the first deep wound of her fractured psyche. The woman on the subway will soon become the vessel of Nina's projected dark feminine, while Beth remains the disordered persona she has over-integrated. The psyche splits between shadow and mask, a polarity that cannot endure. And then it happens. The door opens, and out of nowhere she steps in. The woman from the subway. Her name is Lily. To Nina, she is not simply a newcomer. She is the shadow embodied, the double whose very presence will unravel her fragile order. Later that day, the fragile equilibrium tightens further. For this is not just another rehearsal. Thomas Leroy, the director, enters the studio with his predatory presence. The atmosphere sharpens, and the dancers realize the truth. This is no practice. This is a trial, a selection, a battle to become the new Swan Queen. Yet the role demands more than grace or technique. To claim it, one must embody both swans, the white and the black. As Nina waits for her turn in the trial, a disturbance echoes from Beth's private quarters. The sounds are jarring, shattering glass, violent thuds, a voice unbound in pure rage. This is not the divine star Nina has worshipped, not the flawless image she has carved into her psyche, but a broken woman devouring herself. When Beth finally storms out, her fury tailing like smoke, the chamber door open, an unspoken invitation. Nina steps inside. She sits on the throne of Beth, gazes into the mirror, and for a fleeting moment allows herself to become Beth. And when she departs, she carries with her a relic of this stolen identity, one of Beth's lipsticks, a token she will later use to reapply the mask, to paint herself not as Nina, but as the persona of perfection she so desperately clings to. But now it is time for her trial, and Nina rises to the test. As the White Swan, she is elegance incarnate. Graceful, delicate, porcelain in her beauty. She is perfection. But when the music shifts, when she must summon the Black Swan, whose power lies not in control but in surrender, in imperfection, in seduction, in the dark, she falters. Her body stiffens where it should flow, restrains where it should tempt. And then, as if to twist the knife, Lily distracts her at the critical moment. Nina stumbles. The dream shatters. Disaster. In despair, Nina returns home. She collapses, and her mother moves quickly to comfort her. Yet for Nina, to surrender would be the death of who she believes herself to be. Defeat is annihilation, and so she resolves to fight in the only way she knows, through more practice, more grinding discipline, more Beth. But if the viewer listens carefully, a deeper truth surfaces. As Nina radiates herself, her mother can be faintly heard on the phone with Susie, the company administrator.
I know, Susie, but you just can't expect these girls from that and breaking dance like Beth McIntyre.
I know, Susie, but he can't expect these girls to do that, to break down like Beth McIntyre. It's completely unrealistic. They can do the work, but they don't have Beth's magic feet. They don't understand. She is miserable, and it's... These words are critical. Here we discover Nina's neurotic reverence for Beth is not her own creation. It has been implanted. Her mother, herself a former dancer who never fulfilled her ambitions, is the one who raised Beth unto the pedestal of untouchable perfection. The admiration was not nurtured, it was indoctrinated. And worse, the compulsion to undermine her own daughter, to confess to the administration that Nina will never be Beth, that she is miserable, betrays something darker. This is no simple concern of a mother. It is a symptom of a complex, a psychic wound in the mother herself. A wound that does not merely live in her, but bleeds unto Nina's life, shaping her obsessions and chains. The glimpse reveals the shadow beneath the maternal care, the destructive double hidden within the mother archetype. It is a force we will return to, for it haunts Nina's journey as much as the shadow of the Black Swan itself. After forcing her ego into fragile belief through rigid practice and ritual repetition, Nina completes the illusion by painting her lips with the lipstick stolen from Beth's quarters. It is not merely an ornament. It is a symbolic theft, an attempt to graft Beth's essence onto herself. In that moment, she is no longer simply Nina striving. She is Beth. She is the queen. She is perfection incarnate. With this mask upon her, she returns to the ballet, intent on convincing Thomas that she is not just ready for the role, but that the role itself has found its vessel in her. She enters his quarters, uncertain, frail, clinging to the hope that discipline and sacrifice will win his approval. She speaks of her progress, assuming it will matter, but it does not. What Nina cannot see is that Thomas has already chosen her as Swan Queen. The white swan is flawless, etched into her body, but the black swan still sleeps, buried deep in the shadows of her psyche, and Thomas knows it must be awakened. His method of choice? Not comfort, but pressure. It began the night before, when he sent her home in tears, deliberately breaking her composure. He hoped frustration would fester into defiance, driving her back into his orbit. Now, as she stands before him, she believes she is there to convince him. In truth, he is trying to provoke her, to force the hidden darkness out. He confronts her with hard truths, half-truths, and outright lies. He tells her the role has already been given away. Nina crumbles, surrendering at once. This is not what Thomas wants. Frustrated, he shuts the door as she tries to leave. He demands she fight, that she rages, that she claims what she desires. Yet she remains passive, paralyzed. Nothing awakens. So, he turns to a final, brutal instrument: sexual pressure. A kiss, a sudden violation of boundaries meant not to seduce, but to provoke. And in that moment, something stirs. Nina resists, her teeth sinking into him, sharp and real. For the first time, the Black Swan bares itself. And Thomas, tasting the defiance, knows what he needed to know. The Black Swan is in there. Soon after, she receives the news that she is indeed the new Swan Queen, receiving mixed reactions from her colleagues. Some even project their own Black Swan onto Nina, thinking that she only managed to get the role by offering herself to Thomas. Overjoyed, Nina calls her mother to share the good news. Yet curiously, the very first words she hears are not joy, but dread. What's wrong? A subtle but telling omen. Even in moments of triumph, her mother's instinct is not to celebrate, but to anticipate disaster. A shadow we will soon see take full form. Nina returns home radiant, eager to celebrate with her mother, but the apartment is silent. Her mother is gone. Wandering through the dim halls, Nina drifts into her mother's room. And what we, as a viewer, witness for the first time is walls smothered with paintings and portraits of Nina, all rendered by the mother's hand. The haunting paintings tell a terrifying psychological truth. The mother's identity has collapsed into Nina's. She projects her own failed ballet career onto her daughter and lives through her. The room is a shrine, not to Nina as a separate being, but to Nina as the extension of the mother's unlived life. The countless images serve as mirrors, reinforcing that Nina exists primarily as the mother's creation, not as an autonomous person. It's the externalization of the mother's psyche, her obsession, control, and inability to see Nina apart from herself.
Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment and especially on their children than the unlived life of the parent.
Archetypically, this is the devouring mother at work. She feeds on Nina's success and failures, shaping her like clay, but in doing so, traps her in perpetual childhood, unable to individuate. The paintings, then, are like chains, artistic, beautiful, but imprisoning. A truth Nina senses in her depths, but one she cannot yet allow to fully surface.
Many women who are over-caring for their children try to keep them back from life. It begins by being anxious. Don't do that, it's dangerous. Don't do that, it's dangerous. Don't go to play out with the boys. You could fall and wound, or you get hit over the head. And by trying to keep the children too much in their clutches, and then we speak of devouring mothers.
To escape its suffocating presence, she flees into ritual. She takes a shower, scrubbing at herself as if water could wash away what the psyche insists on showing her. But the rebellion of the shadow only intensifies. It breaks through, not in words, but in flesh. The strange wound on her shoulder, growing, spreading, an external mark of the internal fracture. Nina's distress is broken, as if a spell has snapped, when she hears her mother calling from the kitchen. The reason of her absence? She has gone to buy a large cake, supposedly Nina's favorite, to celebrate the role. But when Nina, anxious and disciplined, refuses, responding that now, of all times, she must not indulge, the warmth of the mother's gesture curdles. Her face hardens, her voice turns cold, and in a flash of wounded pride, she threatens to throw the cake away. This is the devouring mother, fully unmasked. A terrifying complex, not confined to the movie screen, but alive in the world we share. The devouring mother archetype ensures that whatever the child becomes, it is never truly theirs. All is absorbed into the mother's psychic economy. If Nina succeeds, the mother basks in the reflected light. My daughter, the star, as though her own failed ambitions have been redeemed. If Nina falters, the mother gains purpose by caring for her, keeping her bound, infantilized, and dependent. Even Nina's suffering becomes food for her hunger. Thus, what we witness here is not celebration, but sabotage. The cake is no gift, it is a chain, a weapon cloaked in sweetness. The mother fears that her daughter's triumph will awaken true womanhood. Independence, individuation, the severing of the cord. Better then to smother her in guilt, to force her back into the obedient child. And so Nina yields. Still imprisoned in the persona her mother crafted, she takes the cake. In doing so, she silences the voice of her own soul once more, surrendering her noblest desires to the hollow demands of the outside world. The next day marks the beginning of the true ordeal, completing her slow metamorphosis into her dark twin, the Black Swan, which is required for her to perform the role of the Swan Queen. Nina throws herself into practice with the usual tools: discipline, repetition, control. But it's not working. Exhausted, she takes a brief pause and wanders into the communal rehearsal hall, where the other dancers move freely. And there she is, Lily, a name that is the short form of Lilith, the primordial feminine, the untamed and forbidden shadow of womanhood. She is the embodiment of everything Nina has been trained to fear: sensuality, chaos, freedom, darkness. Yet now, she is what Nina must become. Standing next to her is Thomas, putting words on Lily's beautiful imperfections, her sensuality, and how she is not faking it. And with that, he takes his leave, leaving behind a mystified and maybe even a seduced Nina. Nina's ascension as Swan Queen reshapes her world. Within the company, she now shares quarters with the discarded queen, Beth. Beyond the stage, she too is crowned queen by the company, with Thomas enthroned beside her as king. But Nina's unconscious has already chosen her fate, and it will not allow her to rest in the fragile comfort of the dream persona, the illusion of the queen. Through increasingly brutal bodily transformations and through the dark seduction embodied by Lily, the unconscious claws its way to the surface. No matter how desperately Nina or those around her try to drag her back into the reality of the persona, the shadow refuses to be silenced. The shadow, the true Nina, longs to be heard, to live, but it is not evil. It does not create the chaos closing in around her. The chaos is born of Nina's refusal to listen. The unconscious warns, whispers, claws for attention, but she resists, and the more she resists, the more violent the eruption becomes. Another warning arrives. Nina feels herself drawn toward a statue, a fallen angel, a broken swan. Beneath its fractured wings, she suddenly finds herself face to face with Beth. The statue mirrors Beth's state. Once exhaled, now shattered, the queen with the wings clipped by age, failure, and despair. But for Nina, this encounter is more than coincidence. Standing beneath the broken-winged figure, she is literally stepping into Beth's shadow. It is a foreshadowing. If she continues to cling to the persona of the Swan Queen, she too will break, her wings torn away. The shadow here is not her enemy. It is delivering a truth she refuses to face. All ideals collapse, and if you tether your soul to them, you collapse with them. Beth is drunk, furious, and unraveling. In her unbalanced state, her own shadow spills out, and like others before her, she projects the reason for Nina's success. That she seduced Thomas, that she won the role through sex rather than merit. But curiously, this time Nina does not crumble. Instead, she calls the projection out directly, snapping back with a sharp retort.
Let all of us have to. You fucking whore.
It is an aggressive response, one she could not summon the last time this accusation was thrown at her. Again, the shadow within Nina speaks with its sharp teeth. Before the clash can escalate, Thomas intervenes. He steps in to protect his new queen, while at the same time discarding the old one without hesitation. Beth is left alone, broken and humiliated, while Thomas escorts Nina away, carrying the upcoming Swan Queen back to his domain. Here, Thomas once again seeks to summon the Black Swan, this time by forcing a conversation about Nina's sexuality and her relationship to desire. Nina, shocked and unable to engage, withdraws into silence. The exchange exposes her distance from the shadow she must embody. She is still bound in the innocence of the white swan. So, Thomas gives her homework to go home and masturbate. A crude command, but one aimed at breaking the walls of repression and forcing her to confront the part of herself she has never allowed to exist. Nina returns home, and the devouring mother reemerges in full force. She indulges in her own fantasy that Thomas brought Nina home only to exploit her.
Guess he wanted you all to himself. Oh, why? I don't blame him.
Projecting corruption where there may be none. She insists on undressing Nina, clinging to the ritual of control. When her eyes fall on a pair of earrings that Nina has also stolen from Beth, but which she does not recognize, her warmth curdles into suspicion, her voice sharp and cold. Nina resists, half fleeing, half defending. She lies and claims the earrings are false, then declares with uncharacteristic firmness that she does not need her mother's help.
I can do it.
Yet the devouring mother does not hear her. She presses on, stripping not only her clothes, but her autonomy, tearing away the fragile independence that struggles to be born. And then she sees it. The mother reacts with panic, disgust, and tyranny. She insists it is Nina scratching herself, as she allegedly has done before. Without pause, She drags her into the bathroom, clips her nails, and covers the wound. Rituals of control masquerading as care. But what she refuses to face is the deeper truth: that she herself is a root cause to the psychological fractures that gave birth to the wound. Instead, she shifts the blame onto Nina's success and the pressures of her role, folding her daughter once more into the suffocating psychological lens of the child. Too weak, too fragile, too unfit to succeed. All of this plays out beneath the neurotic rhythm of scissors against nails, an act that pretends to protect but exists only to feed the mother's need for control, to suppress the unbearable truth of her nature. She is the devouring mother, revealed again. Nina wakes the next morning from the ordeal and begins to masturbate. Not out of conscious effort or duty, but out of genuine desire. The Black Swan stirs within her, testing its wings in her half-dazed, waking state. Yet the ritual is abruptly broken. She realizes her devouring mother is still in the room, watching like a jailer. The moment collapses, and with it, her awakening. But something has shifted. A subtle voice rises from Nina's psyche, whispering the truth she has long denied. She must escape. We return to the world of the ballet, the company deep in rehearsal for Swan Lake. Suddenly, practice is interrupted by shocking news. Beth has been struck by a car. Thomas believes it was no accident because
everything Beth does comes from within, from some dark impulse.
I guess that's what makes her so thrilling to watch.
But these words betray his nature. There is no grief for his fallen queen, no care for the woman behind the role. Beth has been discarded, and all that matters to Thomas now is finding his perfect swan queen for his perfect ballet. Nina feels compelled to visit Beth in the hospital. There she lies, surrounded by flowers disguised as tokens of care. But in truth, they are flowers for a funeral. Her legs are shattered, her body ruined. Beth, the dancer so many admired, Nina most of all, has performed her last dance. In that sterile room, the persona Nina has worshipped for so long is revealed as fragile and broken. And with its collapse, a part of Nina starts to break as well. Returning home, Nina hears the sound of her mother sobbing as she paints yet another portrait. Nina's reaction makes it clear. This is not the first time she has witnessed such a scene. The tears are not simple sadness, but the sound of a woman suppressing her own self-hatred and sorrow at never having lived her dreams. Rather than face these dark emotions, the mother projects them outward. With each stroke of the brush, she paints herself into Nina, inscribing her broken ambitions onto her daughter's life. The sobbing betrays that at some unconscious level, she knows this is parasitic. She grieves her own failure while binding Nina to carry it forward. The next day, rehearsals continue, each session grinding heavier as the premiere draws near. The pressure carves itself into Nina's body, aching, cracking, yet she drives herself harder, determined to meet expectations that are, by nature, inhuman. Thomas, however, grows increasingly frustrated. The white swan is perfect, but the black still hides. So he escalates his methods. This time he draws on his own shadow, weaving seduction as a weapon. Slowly, he reels her in, pulling her toward the forbidden. And when she yields, when desire flickers to life, he discards her. For Thomas, it was never about intimacy. It was about provocation, about invoking the Black Swan through pressure, chaos, and humiliation. Nina sits in the dim light of the practice room, shocked, humiliated, and hollow. Then Lily enters. She sits beside her, offering comfort, speaking truths Nina cannot yet bear to face. That Thomas may be brilliant, but he is also a selfish king, a man who ultimately cares only for himself. But Nina refuses to see the thread. She retreats home, sinking into the bathtub, its waters enveloping her like a womb, a symbol of comfort, yet ultimately false healing, as she uses it as an escape, as suppression. Behind her stands 2 white swans with black beaks and feet, silent witnesses to the duality tearing at her soul. Yet even here, rest eludes her. Anxiety gnaws at her performance, her body, her control. Clinging to Thomas's command, she begins to masturbate. An awkward, fractured attempt to conjure the Black Swan within. But the feminine in the shadow will not be forced. Instead, she lets herself slip beneath the surface, surrendering to the water. It is a symbolic gesture, a flirtation with death, and with it, the hope of transformation. And as Nina sinks deeper into the unconscious, surrendering control, the shadow begins to rise. Blood seeps from her nose, anxiety grips her body, and then she sees her own suppressed femininity, now taking the form of Lily. The vision makes clear what has been building all along. The ego we know as Nina is losing its grip. Her anima, long repressed, is breaking free, and with each moment, the suppression grows weaker, the eruption more inevitable. She emerges from the water, gasping, only to witness in shock how the wounds inflicted by her unconscious now spread and bleed more violently than ever before. The body bears the truth the ego refuses. And just as her dear mother taught her, she reaches for the nail clippers, clinging to the ritual of control, trying to trim away the chaos. But instead of relief, she is met with it. The haunting, mocking laughter of the very shadow she seeks to suppress. The transformation she has unconsciously summoned has entered its next irreversible stage. The grind continues. Again. The command falls from the mouth of the so-called king, offering no guidance, no truth, only repetition. At last, Nina calls it out. And in that moment, Thomas reveals what he has been all along. Not the king, but the shadow of the king archetype, the tyrant. Before the entire company, he humiliates her. He claims that Lily approached him, urging he be gentler with Nina, and twists it into mockery. He belittles, he dominates, cloaking his cruelty in the guise of noble intent. But the mask slips further still when Nina, crushed, utters a quiet, "Sorry."
Now stop saying that! That's exactly what I'm talking about! Stop being so fucking weak! Again!
That single word, that hint of weakness ignites him. For nothing fuels the tyrant more than submission. Nina confronts Lily about what she sees as a misplaced act of goodwill. But what is most revealing is her question. Why would Thomas even speak with Lily?
Why would he talk to you?
This sentence betrays her psyche. The princess persona, handed down from Beth, still rules within her. In Nina's world, she alone is queen to Thomas the king, while Lily is reduced to nothing more than a seductress, a succubus wrapped in human skin. Yet on the way home, it is Nina herself who once again carries the projection of the sensual seductress, this time from a perverted old man on the subway. It is the third time the role has been cast upon her. A small but telling omen. No matter how many nails she files, no matter how desperately she clings to conscious control, the suppressed shadow is breaking through. At home, the projections continue. Her mother begins probing, asking if Thomas has made advances. Her ego, as always, disguising projections beneath a mask of concern. Nina rejects the narrative, and the devouring mother retaliates, reaching for any weapon in her psychic arsenal to reassert control. She blames Nina for the failure of her own ballet career, trying to bind her daughter to inherited guilt. But Nina resists. She challenges her mother's neurotic perspective, refuses to be swallowed whole. And so, the devouring mother escalates the attack, striking at Nina's deepest vulnerability. She invokes her daughter's psychological wounds, wounds that threaten the fragile persona Nina is clinging to. In doing so, she aims to break the growing rebellion, to drag Nina back into obedience. The most direct example comes when the mother asks Nina,
Are we leaving it alone? Mm-hmm. Let me see.
Nina answers yes, but the so-called mother immediately overrides her, issuing a direct order to see it. Yet at home, away from the stage where the queen persona dominates, Nina's shadow has already claimed firmer ground within her psyche. This time, she does not yield. With sudden force, she says no. But just before the conflict can escalate, the doorbell rings. The mother opens the door, exchanges a few words, and then shuts it quickly. She tells the visitor that whoever they seek is not there. When Nina asks who it was, the mother answers coldly, flat, no one. The old Nina, the White Swan Nina, would have seen through her mother's obvious lie, yet still surrendered to it. But the emerging Nina, one who begins to embody the fullness of womanhood, no longer bends so easily. At home, where the queen persona cannot suppress her, she continues to rebel, where once she would have yielded. It was Lily, arriving to make amends, to invite Nina to dinner. Nina hesitates, but when the devouring mother makes one last feeble attempt to hold her back, defiance rises, and Nina steps out into the night, entering the urban jungle with Lily as her guide, even though that tomorrow is the day where she has to prove to Thomas that she is ready to play the role of her life, the Swan Queen. Under the urban night sky, Nina and Lily sits in a bar, talking about Thomas and his peculiar use of nicknames. In this case, Beth's Little Princess. Lily finds it disgusting, patronizing. But Nina insists it's sweet. So sweet, in fact, that she remarks no one but Beth would ever be called that, no matter what Lily believes. This detail is more important than it seems. Beth's outward persona was that of a queen, commanding, flawless, untouchable. It is the same persona Nina has over-integrated into her psyche, the mask she longs to wear. But in truth, Beth was never a queen. She was always Thomas's little princess. The title reveals the truth of their dynamic. Beth was not sovereign, but subject, not queen, but child. And Nina, shaped in the same mold, stands in that very role now. Just as with her mother, she remains trapped in the relation of the obedient daughter, the princess shaped and owned by the king. Thomas claims he seeks a queen, but his king complex ensures he can never create one. He shapes only princesses, not queens. This complex is not confined to Thomas. Even in this modern age, it is quite common for many people in a position of authority, such as fathers, to fail in seeing their daughters as women, clinging instead to the infantile image of the little princess. And so these daughters, never allowed to mature fully, become women who unconsciously seek out a replacement father-king to rule them. Beth is the tragic product of this cycle. Her destructive acts are not the rebellion of a sovereign woman, but the traumas of a child, a princess, who was never permitted to grow. And the darkness Thomas admired in her, the dangerous, destructive beauty he praised, was nothing more than the suppressed woman within her psyche, her black swan, forever silenced and starved, only able to break through in moments of chaos and despair. Now they sit in the dim glow of the restaurant. Lily, Lilith in disguise, devouring her extra bloody burger, while Nina, fragile and restrained, picks at her light meal with fork and spoon. In the shadows, their psyches begin their own ballet. Nina drifts close to Lily's orbit, then pulls away, only to be drawn back again. The distance shrinks with each movement, resistance faltering. At last, when the moment is ripe, Lily extends her hand with a small offering. A pill, promising relaxation, promising escape and rebellion, with only a limited price to pay. Nina hesitates and rejects the offer. In the restroom, Nina slips into the black top borrowed from Lily. A symbolic surrender, a step into the world of the dark feminine. Before the mirror, she adjusts her new guise, but the reflection betrays her. The wound on her shoulder has grown, spreading like a mark of initiation. Before she can fully register it, her phone rings. Her mother. A synchronicity, what psychology calls a meaningful coincidence, arrives at the very moment she teeters between two worlds. But it is too late. Nina rejects the call that would drag her back into the old ways, and instead ascends the stairs, moving deeper into her transformation. When Nina returns, she finds Lily at the bar, emptying the contents of the rejected pill into a drink. As the cocktail is finished, Lily notices her and, with a seductive murmur, pulls Nina close, offering the spiked glass and the company of two fine young men. For a moment, Nina resists. The looming way of tomorrow's final test flickers in her mind like a warning. But Lily, the seductress plays her new and strongest card. She frames leaving as a return to the mother's prison. To refuse Lily would be to return to obedience. To stay is to rebel. And so Nina stays, and with a deep sip of the spiked drink, she crosses the threshold. One of the young men leans in and asks Nina, "You haven't told me who you are." Still clinging to her mask, she replies, "I'm a dancer." He presses further, "No, I meant your name." Another young man asks if they are sisters. Lily answers yes at the exact moment Nina says no. "Blood sisters," Lily insists. The words cut deeper than casual play. For Lily is Nina's shadow double, embodying everything Nina has repressed: sexuality, spontaneity, destruction. By calling them blood sisters, Lily unconsciously names the truth. What runs in Nina's veins runs in hers as well. They are bound not by family, but by archetype, two halves of the same psychic whole. The group continues talking until they are interrupted by a phone. The ringtone, fittingly, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake.
Sorry.
The men show little interest in either ballet or the masterpiece itself, to Nina's quiet disappointment. As she sits there, she gazes at her hands, and for a moment, the skin seems to transform into that of a swan, an effect likely stirred by the spiked drink. Just then, the young man pulls her back to reality by calling her beautiful. She feels flattered. Why? Because those are the words she longs to hear from her king, the only primary and idealized masculine figure in her life. But then it's time to dance. Lily takes Nina's hand, and together they plunge into the night. High on drugs, masks and egos stripped away, leaving only raw, unguarded psyche. They dance. Nina spins into a trance, losing all control, dancing with Lily, with men, with whomever drifts into her orbit. And if you look closely, just for a fleeting second, you can see it. Nina's face shifts. A new visage emerges. One we will soon come to recognize all too well. Nina wakes to the harsh glare of a toilet lamp, locked in a kiss with a complete stranger. Shocked, she pulls away, nervous and disoriented, suddenly aware that she is adrift in a world she does not understand. She stumbles out, searching for escape, when Lily finds her and asks, "Where are you going?" The film cuts, and now the two women are sliding into the back of a cab together. As the city blurs past the window, Lily's fingers begin to creep over Nina's bandaged hand, tracing her skin in a slow, deliberate gesture. The touch is charged, sensual, exposing Nina's body to a realm of feeling and lust she has long been unable to. Still intoxicated by drugs and alcohol, they arrive at Nina's home. The mother greets them with cold suspicion and sharp, prying questions. But Nina does not shrink, as she once would have. Instead, she answers with teasing laughter and provocative defiance. Her rebellion is in full swing. Cornered, the devouring mother reaches for her last tool: physical violence. A desperate act exposing her weakness. Nina and Lily flee into her room, slam the door, and barricade it shut. The message is clear. Nina is no longer her mother's obedient child. She is something else. Alone together in the room, Lily and Nina enact a ritual. Wild, passionate sex. It is not merely pleasure, but initiation. The dark feminine flooding into Nina's body, her psyche, her soul. Moving tattoos right across skin, absurd visions erupt. Visceral fragments blur into sensation. The barriers collapse. The psyche dissolves the line between the reality perceived and the reality felt. What unfolds is no longer simple intimacy, but the breaking open of Nina's world. And for the first time, Nina fully surrenders. She gives herself completely to the Black Swan. When the act is over, she opens her eyes to her own dark visage staring back at her before her vision drowns into blackness beneath a pillow. It is the next morning. The new Nina awakens, not with a smile, but with a headache and the sudden realization that she is late for the final stage rehearsal. She rushes to the door, only to notice the barricade still in place, and Lily nowhere to be found. But there is no time to unravel the mystery. She must go to the opera. Before she leaves the apartment, she sees her mother sitting stiffly, arms crossed, staring into the void. Nina asks why she wasn't woken. No answer comes. Silence is the reply. It is finished. The mother never knew the real Nina and never cared to. Now that Nina has begun to transform into her true self, the mother no longer recognizes her as her own and rejects her from the nest. This is the hallmark of the devouring mother. When the child rejects her neurosis, she rewrites the story. It is the child's fault. She lost her way. This is not the daughter I raised. The perfect excuse for the psyche to evade self-reflection and turn from the hard truth. Nina arrives at the opera, the music of her triumph already filling the hall. But it is not her dancing to it. No, on stage it is Lily, the Black Swan. Nina approaches the king, Thomas, and utters her apology. Curiously, this time the king accepts, answering plainly, "Go warm up." For all the destructive traits of an unbalanced king like Thomas, there remain fragments of order. Focus on the goal, refusal to let fleeing emotions interfere. And so, Nina obeys. She begins to warm up, preparing for her moment. While in the back of her mind, a question lingers like a thorn. What were Lily's true motives last night? After Lily finishes her surprisingly strong rehearsal as Nina's stand-in, she approaches to explain the situation. In the conversation that follows, Nina pretends she never knew that the drink was spiked. And more disturbingly, she learns that Lily never came home with her at all. It is a weak attempt at denial, an effort to suppress the truth, that Nina willingly embraced her darker side, and in doing so, nearly sabotaged her own dream, or prison, depending on your perspective. Lily, of course, sees through it immediately, meeting the evasion not with anger, but with a smile, a laugh, and her disarming humor. Nina takes the stage, dancing, practicing, striving to appease her king, but she cannot ignore how his gaze drifts, again and again, away from her, the would-be queen, and toward her, Lily. In that moment, Nina feels the weight of a dreadful fate, that she will suffer Beth's destiny before her reign even begins. Nina is granted a moment of leisure at home, but she finds no rest. The old methods of pretending all is well now suffocate her. The childlike cocoon feels unbearable. She cannot stomach it any longer, and so she destroys it and returns for the final rehearsal. And she does it well, confirmed by the approving thumbs up from the king. Only when the moment comes to hurl herself into death does she hesitate, her intuition whispering that this fall may not be as innocent as it appears.
The mirror does not flatter. It faithfully shows whatever looks into it. Namely, the face we never show to the world, because we cover it with the persona, the mask of the actor.
According to psychology, the mirror is where the ego meets itself. It reflects the persona, the mask, but it also hints at what lies behind it. In dreams and myths, encountering oneself in a mirror often signals a threshold, the psyche demanding a confrontation between the image we project and the truth we suppress. That is what Nina faces here, an unflinching confrontation with herself, leaving her shaken and stunned. But as so many times before, the spell is broken. Lily enters, and to Nina's dismay, she learns that Lily has been appointed her alternate. Desperate, Nina begs Thomas to assign the role to anyone else. But logic fails her. Her words cannot translate her emotional need. And Thomas, the king, respects only reason, so he responds not with empathy, but with cloaked authority. He calms the trembling princess, instructing her to go home and rest, so that she will be ready for tomorrow's grand premiere, her supposed ascension. But Nina does not want to return home, to the stillness, where the shadow prowls freely. Instead, she clings to the safety of performance, burying herself in rigid practice. Not even when the music fades does she pause. Yet the psyche cannot be denied. If she will not come to it, it will come to her. And it does. In the silence, she looks in the mirror, and the psyche looks back, laughing. Then the lights cut out. A signal. The threshold shifts, and the shadow takes the stage. Still clinging to sanity, Nina searches for a rational explanation, as she always has. But this time, it is different. The shadows are no longer confined to the psyche. They come alive. The inner and outer worlds melt together once again. She finds herself upon the grand stage, shrouded in darkness, eerie laughter echoing through the hall. Drawn by the sound, she follows it, until her greatest fear stands revealed. Thomas, the king, ensnared in the sensual embrace of Lily. Nina freezes, paralyzed in shock. But Lily's eyes find hers across the void, and she smiles, a knowing smile, cruel and tender, all at once. And then Thomas shifts, his form dissolving into truth. The masculine Black Swan, the very figure Nina first encountered in her dream at the beginning of the film. Once again, Lily emerges as the bringer of the unwanted truth, the shadow made flesh. Thomas was likely always acted as Nina's substitute father in the absence of her own. But he never chose nor wanted to bear that role. He is not the archetypical father who provides safe boundaries. He is the shadow of the king, driven only by the preservation of his throne, the opera stage. Where the true father nurtures growth, Thomas exploits the gap, bending Nina's development to his will. So why does he appear in the form of the male Black Swan? The Black Swan represents Nina's own shadow anima, her unwanted feminine, her repressed instinct. sexuality, and chaos. But when Thomas manifests in this guise, it reveals something more dangerous. Her repression of the feminine has allowed her animus, her inner masculine, suppressed into shadow in many women, to colonize and replace it. Instead of Nina owning her dark feminine and stepping into her full womanhood, she unconsciously lets Thomas embody it for her, wielding it against her. And how does he wield it? By telling her she is frigid, too controlled. By feeding her shame. He seduces her with the illusion that freedom can only be found by surrendering to him. He positions himself as the key to her dark feminine. Only I can awaken the Black Swan in you. By doing this, he wears the Black Swan as his property. Instead of Nina discovering her anima within, he frames it as something he alone can unlock through control, humiliation, and seduction. So when Nina hallucinates Thomas literally becoming the Black Swan, her unconscious lays bare the truth. The dark, sexual, destructive power within her has been hijacked. Thomas is not teaching her to embrace her anima. He is paralyzing it, turning it into a mask he wears to dominate. And this is why Nina could never truly become a woman under his rule. Under Thomas, she would remain only a princess, an extension of his king complex. Just like Beth, just like her mother, just like the other dancers who grew up in his kingdom. And you want an example to support this unsettling truth. Recall Thomas's apartment. The picture on the wall. A black uterus. Perhaps the most powerful image of womanhood itself. Stolen, corrupted, and twisted into a tool of power. Under his gaze, it is no longer a sacred symbol of creation, but an emblem of control used to bind his dancers to him, keeping his chosen princesses in submission. While this revelation strikes at the very heart of the film, Nina's journey of transformation is not yet over. Shaken by the sight of Thomas and Lily entwined, Nina flees, not to her home, but back to Beth, her fallen queen. Beth sits weak and broken, alone, with only a few paltry flowers at her side. But Nina does not come to pay her respects. She comes to return the stolen relics, lipstick, trinkets, fragments of a persona she once clung to. These were the tools she used to graft Beth's mask unto her own psyche, to live as the queen she worshipped. But now she rejects them. She no longer wishes to share in Beth's cursed fate, now that she knows what it truly entails. Beth seizes Nina, demanding to know what she is doing. And Nina explains. She stole them because she wanted to be perfect, like Beth. But among the trinkets lies a nail file, the very tool the old Nina once used to force a false sense of control over her psyche. Beth takes it in hand and delivers the truth. She is not perfect. She is nothing. Then, in a frenzy, she stabs herself in the face with it, violently trying to destroy the mask she has been forced to wear for ages. Nina flees in terror, frantically hammering the elevator buttons to escape the nightmare. Yet when she looks down, the horror is complete. The bloody nail file is no longer in Beth's hand. It is in her own. It is important to understand that Black Swan is one of the finest portrays of what it feels like when a psyche begins to break down. One of the most crucial aspects of such collapse is the blurring of two realities, the outer world and the inner world. Both exist within us all, but as Nina's neurosis intensifies, the line between them grows thinner until they bleed into one another. In this scene, Beth is the one holding the nail file, the one doing the stabbing. How do we know? Because after Nina flees in terror and returns home, if you look closely, there is no blood on her hands. The violence belonged to Beth, but Nina's psyche absorbed it as her own, as she still suffers from the highly integrated persona of Beth. Nina finally returns home. There is nowhere else to go. A familiar sound greets her, the sobbing of her mother. She ignores it, rushing instead to scrub her supposedly bloody hands. But as she turns off the kitchen light, a whisper breaks the silence. "Sweet girl." She spins, flicks the light back on, and panics. In the corner stands an elderly woman, her chest torn open, a bloody wound where the heart should be. This is the devouring mother made manifest, the archetypical complex that haunts her mother's psyche and has poisoned their home. Nina flees to the bathroom, retching, breaking. Again, she hears her mother's sobbing. This time she follows the sound into the painted shrine of her mother's room. But the images are alive. They scream, they weep, they hiss words like mine and sweet. Nina screams for them to stop, but they will not. In desperation, she attacks them, the symbols of the prison her mother has built for her. Behind her, another figure emerges, not the devouring mother, but another aspect of her mom's psyche. The suppressed ballerina, her mother's unlived youth, her strangled dreams, all the fragments she tried to live out through Nina. Now that Nina rejects this role, these specters attack. The nightmare only shatters when her physical mother appears, breaking the illusion, demanding to know what she is doing. Nina flees, locking herself away in her room. But the psyche does not release her. Her body begins to transform. Psychology recognizes how the unconscious can erupt into the physical. Itching, rashes, wounds.
The patient's neurosis is not just a matter of psychology, it is a living system of reactions that involve the whole man. When the psyche is neglected, it expresses itself in the body. If the patient does not realize this, the neurosis often appears as a physical illness.
But Nina is beyond that now. Her body convulses with violent visions, feathers breaking through skin, bones reshaping. What is happening inside? The feminine finally erupting, destroying everything false in its path, is symbolized by her grotesque bodily transformation. For Nina, it is no longer metaphor, it is real. Nina's mother finally manages to force the door, but Nina explodes in rage, violently shoving her back. The mother resists, wedging her hand into the frame to block it, but Nina no longer cares. She slams the door again and again upon her mother's hand, an eruption of fury, suppressed for far too long. With the devouring mother cast out of the room, the transformation resumes in full force. Nina convulses under its weight, the psyche breaking through the body until the violence turns inward and she collapses, knocking herself unconscious. The scene closes on a broken ballerina music box. its mechanism faltering as it strains to play Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. The melody stumbles, fractured. It is a clear signal. The old Nina is gone. The ballerina is broken. Nina awakens to find her mother watching over her, socks pulled over her hands to keep her from scratching herself raw. But Nina knows she must go. Today is the day of her Swan Queen performance. But her mother will not allow it. She insists the world of ballet is destroying Nina, that it has stolen her little girl. She has even called the company to inform them Nina is unfit to perform. But the little girl is gone. Nina erupts, attacking her mother and forcing her way out. As she does, the devouring mother shrieks after her. "You can't handle this!" The words ignite Nina's fury. She turns back, no longer trembling, and declares, "I am the Swan Queen. It was you who could never leave the corp." Here the truth stands revealed. Nina has now fully emerged as a queen, not a fragile princess, but a woman embodying both the light and the dark of the feminine within her psyche. The scene in the painted shrine made it clear. Her mother was never a mother at all. She is still only a small princess in the corp, feeding parasitically on Nina's ascent. Nina storms into the ballet, straight to her private chambers. Lily protests. Thomas looks on in shock. Neither expected her return. He follows her inside. Thomas tells her he has already asked Lily to replace her. But the Nina before him is no longer the princess, no longer the obedient girl who surrendered. Something else stands in her place. She does not yield. She demands to know if he has announced the changes publicly. He hesitates, and in that pause, the truth betrays itself. He has not. Nina seizes the moment, threatening the scandal he can ill afford after the Beth debacle. Thomas steps back, and then, curiously, he smiles, with something between fear and respect. For at least the Black Swan has arrived. He addresses her differently now, urging her to let herself loose. With that, Lily is dismissed, and Nina reclaims the throne. Yet her transformation runs far deeper than Thomas or anyone can comprehend. In the blurred reality she now inhabits, her body is still shifting, flesh turning into feather, bones reshaping into wings. But none of that matters. The stage is waiting. And she dances, first as the white swan, with a grace unmatched. The audience gasps, and even her king acknowledges her radiance. Yet even in this moment of triumph, the shadow intrudes. From the corner of her gaze, Nina sees Lily, corrupting the scene with a cruel display. Hidden from the audience's eye, but not from Nina's, Lily flirts shamelessly with the male dancer who plays Siegfried, her prince, even seizing his crutch for Nina alone to witness. The tension breaks her concentration. As the prince lifts her high, the shadows stir and overwhelm her for a moment too long. The slip comes, the prince loosens his grip, and Nina crashes to the floor. But she forces herself back into the rhythm, refusing to surrender. Then comes Rothbart, the dark sorcerer who curses Odette in Swan Lake. He leads Nina away for the divertissement, a moment that should offer her breath, yet brings only unease. Curiously, Rothbart is costumed as the masculine Black Swan, a stark reminder that in Nina's reality, and maybe your own, The stage is not haunted only by a single dark masculine, but by many destructive masculine forces circling her and every woman within reach. In the divertissement, as Nina rushes back to her chambers, she encounters a furious Thomas, enraged by her fall. But Nina is no longer the timid girl who once cowered before him. She deflects the blame onto the prince, a subtle but sharp reversal. She teaches him, and us, a lesson. When a man allows himself to be seduced and distracted by the Black Swan, by figures like Lily, there is always a price to pay. Nina enters her chambers and finds Lily seated on her throne, mocking her, taunting that she is not ready for the next act, the one where she must embody the Black Swan. Lily's face begins to distort, shifting between her own and Nina's, revealing the truth. Lily is not only rival but mirror, the shadow self rising from within. Enraged by the revelation, Nina attacks. She hurls Lily's form into a mirror, shattering it, a declaration of identity's fragmentation. The world of normality, with its masks and reflections, has no power here anymore. They fight, two bodies writhing, two selves colliding, as Lily's image warps and flickers between Shadow Double and Nina herself. At last, the struggle ends with a shard of glass driven into Lily's gut. Nina roars, blood-red eyes ablaze. It's my time now. In that instant, she is no longer merely Nina. She has become the Black Swan incarnate. For a fleeting moment, Nina comes to her senses, shocked at what she has done. Fear trembles through her, but it quickly dissolves. A knock echoes at the door. It is time for the Black Swan to take the stage. And with that summons, the shadow surges. The Black Swan floods through Nina's psyche and seizes control. It is her moment now. The Black Swan takes the stage, moving with an intensity rarely witnessed, an energy of seductive darkness that consumes the room. She circles the men as if they were nothing more than playthings, toys for her dance of power. A brief pause comes, and she withdraws from center stage, trembling with lust and ecstasy at her own performance. What once was a bodily transformation of pain and horror now floods her veins as waves of dark ecstasy. She returns to the floor, each step charged with unshakable mastery. In her fractured reality, wings unfurl from her back, a final act of glory from the Black Swan to a mesmerized world. She is celebrated by the roaring crowd, the theater rising in thunderous ovation, an adoration not for Nina, but for the Black Swan incarnate. She rushes backstage, seizes Thomas, and claims him with a deep, commanding kiss. For the first time, he sees her not as a fragile princess, but as a queen, subject to her power. Yet she does not linger in his grasp. She tears herself free, proof of her sovereignty, and emerges once more upon the stage, greeted by a rain of roses and flowers. After the ovation, the queen retreats once more to her chambers. But the triumph is short-lived. She is confronted by the memory of what she has done, the blood still seeping from the bathroom where she pushed the body of Lily. Yet the Black Swan is unbothered. She covers the flowing red with a towel, sits before the mirror and begins preparing for the final act. A gentle knock interrupts her ritual. To her shock, it is Lily, alive, smiling, offering only praise for her breathtaking performance before leaving again. Confusion spreads through Nina's psyche. If Lily lives, then who bleeds behind the bathroom door? She opens it and finds nothing. The room is empty. The truth dawns. She never stabbed Lily. She stabbed herself. The wound in her abdomen opens afresh as she pulls the shard of broken mirror from her body. For a moment, the black swan recedes, and the fragile ego returns, terrified, trembling, realizing the cost of her metamorphosis. She sinks before the mirror, tears falling, mourning the severity of her wound. Yet, even here, she begins to paint her face once more. Each stroke of makeup a desperate invocation of balance, a ritual of composure to carry her toward the final act. She dances and she dances, her prince now dressed in black, seduced and claimed by the Black Swan. The sorcerer clad in his feathers of shadow, the stage filled with white ballerinas orbiting her descent into darkness. At last, the moment arrives, the final fall, the death of Odette. As the music swells, Nina's eyes finds her mother in the audience, tearful, trembling. Their gaze locks, a silent farewell between daughter and devouring mother. Then Nina leaps, surrendering to the death drop, her real wound, never allowed to heal, bleeding open beneath the costume. She lands, broken yet radiant. The theater again erupts into thunderous praise. Thomas kneels beside her, drunk on triumph. They love you. The words recall the old Nina, the little girl who once lived only for such affirmation. And then, as always, his mask slips. My little princess, I always knew you had it in you. Even now, he cannot see her as queen, only as princess, his creation, his possession. But the blood betrays the truth. The wound is real, crimson flooding the stage. Shock ripples through the company. What did you do? Thomas mutters. Nina smiles faintly, whispering the words of transcendence. I felt it. Perfect. It was perfect. And then the light, white, blinding, absolute, floods her vision. Her death is not collapse, but consummation. The final act of transformation. The black swan's wings close. The white swan takes flight. Nina is gone. The black swan does not end in triumph or tragedy, but in paradox. Perfection was achieved, but only through destruction. Individuation, the integration of shadow and self, demanded not her survival, but her death. Nina becomes eternal, not by escaping her wound, but by embracing it fully, bleeding into light. In this way, her story echoes the oldest myths. To be reborn as whole, one must first be broken.